Good morning and welcome to the 16th episode of Retuning Your Firm. It's actually the 31st episode if you go back to the 20th of March. And one thing that we have in common between the first episode back at the beginning of March, 20th of March rather, is lockdown. We're all now in a second lockdown. So I suspect that will occur in various ways during this show. Hope you all had a good time in Remo, those that managed to find those few minutes to have some informal networking. It's a completely different space. Sneak preview, we're going to be using it for our annual awards, so that's going to be an interesting one, and that we're going out about those next week. So let's think about, what are we talking about today? What are today's themes? Well, we've got three. Marketing, and if you recall from last week's poll, marketing is now considered to be of equal importance to finance in partner-directed discussions, and that is 37 points gap made up in literally 2 months. So marketing really at the top of the agenda, and I don't think we can ask for a more efficient aficionado of marketing than Eliot Moss from Mishcon. So delighted that you can join us today. We then come to strategy, something that a lot of people talk about and not everybody really understands, and delighted that Robert Camp, who is very unusual because he has been the managing partner of a very successful West Country firm called Stephen Scown, which many of you will have heard of, if anything else because of Sunday Times, best place to work. And he is now a consultant. And I've always said that there should be a transfer market in managing partners. So maybe this is a step in that direction, but who knows? But anyway, Robert, delighted to have you with us today. And William Johnson, who lives in the north. So for him, living in an area of tier 3 and moving into a national lockdown probably isn't that different. But as a psychologist, delighted that we're having your thoughts, because one thing that I think a lot of people, particularly in the south, will be feeling is, well, there's not much problem here. There isn't, there's not much COVID. So why are we suddenly in lockdown? And the stress that brings is something that management and leadership can actually help, if not resolve, but at least go some way to neutralizing. So delighted to hear from William. So just to go through those names again, so Eliot Moss, Partner Director of BD at Mishcon de Reya, Robert Camp, who's the principal now of Robert Camp Consulting, William Johnson, the Managing Director of the Openside Group, Francesca is coming in as our ray of sunshine and anchor tenant, and somebody who will always bring a positive outlook and a wonderful perspective, which is fantastic, from Grant Thornton International, and of course yours truly, founder and chief exec of the Managing Partners Forum. So that's our kind of lineup of panel today, obviously in the order of appearance. But before we go into the panel session, we're going to be going through the polls, and in particular, just our usual, what are the strategies for retuning your firm? What are the things that that drive every episode that we've been running with so far? So the first thing is, you've got to think big. As Lewis Carroll said, you've got to believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. You've also got to think small. You've got to think about the angles that resonate with your key audiences. It's all very well having a great idea, but you've got to make it such a busy, noisy world at the moment. You've got to absolutely focus on something that really, really resonates. And I'm sure Elliot will be picking up that point a bit later. Remember that you are the power of your relationships. And it's not very good having a telephone directory. That's great, but it doesn't get you very far. It's all about reciprocity. It's about returning favors. It's about, and I'm sure William will be picking up that aspect to some extent as well. Think about campaigns, not a one-off. Again, very strong marketing concept. But today's session, yes, it's Friday morning and it's 9 o'clock and we're having a session of retuning your firm. Actually, this is the 31st episode, and I know a lot of people have been a bit like Francesca and have been on nearly every episode. So that's fantastic. So thank you for that. You've got to go for new ideas and new services. You've got to drop convention without at the same time losing the baby with the bathwater. And that's quite an important shift. A lot of people 6 months ago were saying new business model, everything's going to change. Income didn't drop that much. Now they're going back to, let's get the strategy clear, let's have clear purpose, and let's make sure that's communicated and cascaded down the organization. But you've got to think about new things. Speed has always been of the essence. You've got to think about your market assumptions. I'm an accountant, and therefore, for me, I know perfectly well if you change the accounting policies, otherwise assumptions, you get a different profit number. That's easy. But it's exactly the same. When you're thinking about doing a project or anything, think about what are the assumptions that underlie that particular project, and then articulate them very, very clearly. And then you can market test them as you roll out that product. And if they prove invalid, and most will, as we know from world of marketing, most new products fail, that's normal, amend them, pivot in a new direction, which is sometimes called lean start. And finally, be entrepreneurial. Now, what that actually means is keep listening and innovating. And to be honest, the most important word in that sentence is listening. If you're not listening to your clients, why should your services be in alignment with their needs? It's as basic as that. And the same with your people. If you're not hearing what they're telling you, how can you make sure that you as the leader then put the right environment in place? So I'd like to thank Alina Kudsko of Globsec in Bratislava for those thoughts. Come back in April 2020, so right at the beginning of our first lockdown, if you like. So still 6 months, 7 months on, still equally relevant. So just really setting the scene for today. So now let's go into the poll section. So first of all, I'd like to thank UK government. I think the best way I can present this was one day I send the results to them, and one day I was one day late and they asked me where they were. Now, in thought leadership terms, that's about as good as you can get. Equally, the House of Lords, they put out a very interesting and useful report on the future UK-EU relationship on professional business services, which you haven't read. I suggest you do, because it's got some really good information in. And I think I'm correct in saying that the only poll that they included was one of the polls from this particular series show. So again, we're obviously impacting in all sorts of different places. So I suppose the key message coming out of that is when you come to do the poll today, please do it, it helps. So let's have a look at what was last week's poll. This was our monthly tracker. I think the one that's fascinating is the 30% or more when you're looking at the level of dip in the firm's income. Back in April, this was beginning of April, 3rd of April, more than half firms were projecting a dip in their income of over 30%. That's dropped to 12%. And if you go over to the other side to none, what was 7 is now in the early 20s and has been consistently for a few months. And average 10% roughly. And what I'm hearing from talking to people is about 7% is roughly what on average the sector is looking to see as a dip. Now, that's fundamentally different, obviously, than the views back in April. So that's interesting. This is I always call it my barbecue tongs. But what's going on in terms of levels of activity? Well, the blue one is the expansion. So back in February, Boris Bounce, everybody was expecting to expand, 80% of theirs. Only 6% of firms were expecting to contract. And we had that massive scissor effect sometime around about April, May. We didn't track it until May, so I can't know exactly when, but we pretty much know what was going on. And then pretty much, unfortunately, contraction has been in the ascendancy. Nearly met in August. Everybody came back from holiday, felt, oh my God, at the end of August, I think. Big gap there, kind of made it up. And now it's again, but if you add 35 and 31, that comes to 66, which means there's about a third of people who are reckoning that it's going to be no change. That's kind of what that tells me. If you're looking at headcount, I'm afraid that's going in a different direction. We really are not looking for expansion. And I know that a lot of firms are looking at their headcount. It used to be marketing people, as Elliot would know, and now they're suddenly realizing, gosh, marketing people are rather important to win new work. So that's kind of reversed. But there are a lot of people who have actually been, unfortunately, let go. And this is just in our sector. I'm not even talking about hospitality or other sectors. I'm sure that would be totally dire compared with this one. And what about new work, which again is something we're looking at? Well, that's actually quite interesting because now for the last 2 months, 50% of firms have been looking to expand over the next year. You can see the same scissor effect, but actually it's been much more in and out across the last few months. So that's quite an interesting trend. What about working from home? Again, the idea that everybody will be back in the office, no one, in other words, is next to nothing. And there's a steady 20% who are going to be, everybody's going to be working from home. And I guess increasingly in the middle, around half. So it's just kind of talking about the hybrid world that we're increasingly reading about. What's that doing to office space requirements? Well, as you can imagine, there's about half of firms are going to be using 20% or more less space, if that's not a contradiction in terms. So here, that's obviously not something which is positive for the property world. This is quite an interesting one. This is obviously has a psychological piece, but what extent are leaders accessible? Are they transparent? Is pain being shared? Are they sharing strategic options? I mean, 2 of the firms on today, both Roberts and Elliot, have both done really, really well through the years in the Sunday Times Best Place to Work. And these are the sort of things that really, really matter when you're actually people are assessing leadership's contribution to the business. I don't quite know what happened around transparency between 90% dropping to 46 for broadly the same group of people. So that was a bit of a weird one. So something's happened there, but hey, that's what polls sometimes give you, as we know from America in the last few days. What about priorities? Well, this again will be hearten the marketing people. Differentiate the brand has moved to the top. And curiously, altering your business model, which was the top in February, is now at the bottom. So there's very much a shift away from let's throw everything up and change it all over to let's get the brand right, let's get the strategy right, let's get the operational efficiency right, let's develop people's skills. Those are the business priorities. And what's getting in the way? Well, the poor economic outlook. 85% of people over the last and this is the top 3. So 85% of people included in their top 3 never had anything up into the 80s before in these questions, as you can see. So the poor economic outlook is absolutely the thing that's preventing people from getting to a good place. And then the financial health of the client base, which quite frankly wouldn't even have been in the list 6-7 months ago, but is now a really big issue. There's no point in working for somebody if they don't pay you, is kind of the obvious point, I guess. Employee turnover used to be 25%, isn't even figuring anymore. Lack of skills and talent used to be 35%, hardly figures either. So the things that were holding firms back 6, 9, 7 months ago totally changed. Totally different world from that point of view. And this is the one that, again, probably will be particularly heartening for the marketing people who might be on the call. Marketing has moved up to be joint equal with finance on just under 70% in terms of the areas carrying most weight during partner direct discussions. And if you look at the sort of olive line, which was September, that was running around about 35%, but less. Massive, massive change in terms of people suddenly realizing that actually new clients and new skills do actually matter. So there you go. So that's the feedback from last week's poll. So what we're going to do today, well, we're going to do on marketing. That may not surprise you. And what I've done today is kind of looked at some of the questions that we asked back in April, May, when we were doing a whole range of different polls. And I aggregated all the ones which I thought were really interesting on marketing. And I'm just trying to see to what extent are attitudes the same now as they were 6-7 months ago, as we're now entering into a second lockdown, and how people felt in the first lockdown. We have the data for the first time around, which is helpful, so we can do the comparison. Right, okay, let's have a look. What does the poll show us? So this gives Elliot a chance to reflect. Vulnerability, what proportion of your new workflow typically comes from new clients? Well, nobody says none. That's perhaps not unsurprising. Probably didn't need to put it in. It's kind of obvious, I guess. A modest percentage, about 10% up to 5%, and pretty much equal between 15 to 20 and over 20. So, you know, if you're trying to grow a business, that's quite a big chunk of business that you're going to be looking for. We're now looking at kind of the impact of people working from home in terms of there are 4 different scenarios here, as you will know from having completed it. So to what extent do people working from home on a long-term basis, and I think that is a working assumption that many people believe to be a sensible one to take, will adversely impact your client's ability to win work from existing UK clients, and it's modest, 43%. And 14% no impact, 33 minimal. So there's only about 10% of people who consider that to be significant. And again, that ties in with a lot of what I've been seeing. In terms of your ability to win work from new clients, again, the significant impact has gone up to more like 20%, and the modest impact remains the primary one there. So it's not a huge driver. In terms of international work from existing non-UK clients, again, modest impact, but nothing really significant. But when it then comes to the ability to win work from non-UK clients, then that one, again, the numbers are creeping up. So it's nearer 30% on the significant, or with 5% into extreme. So that's a broad view as to where the client relationship side is looking. In terms of expenditure, the significant trend there is reduction by more than 20% in looking at what's been happening in the year that's just about to end. In other words, 2020 compared with 2019 calendar. So about a third of you saying it's reduced by more than 20%. And then there's a few brave souls, I'm sure, who are looking at increases, but that's less than 20% in total. So around about 20% total looking for an increase. So 20% about the same, and the vast bulk are looking at a reduction year on year. If we now look at what I call this year coming up compared with the year that's just been, so 2021 compared with 2020, about the same is the one that is. So in other words, and then there's quite a few people who are looking for an increase. So it kind of looks to me like it's a little bit of a blip here. In other words, that people have reduced their marketing expenditure in the current year, 2020, but are now looking to increase it in the year coming ahead with some quite significant increases. That's 50% plus, doing the math. Well, 49% adding the 3 together are now looking to increase, a third the same, and almost nobody looking to reduce. So I think the message has got through fairly clearly that slashing marketing isn't a very sensible space to go. Where are people actually spending time? Where are marketing people currently spending the major time? And again, people could score as many as applied. And Marcoms and pitch support come through strongest. followed fairly quickly by, looking at it, it's quite hard to work this one through, coaching, frontline advice, CRM systems is next probably. So I call the staples, in other words, the pitch, support, the Marcoms and the CRM, they're the three ones which marketing appear to be spending and playing a major role. And that keyword major is important. When it then comes now to whether people think they should be spending time, well, it's sourcing new clients. And that, again, I think is quite helpful in understanding that, in other words, that yes, Marcoms is still there. Yes, CRM systems is still there. Yes, pitch support is still there. And they're all quite big. But sourcing new clients, which was around about 38%, if you look at the current situation, has grown to 68%. So it's doubled. So I think, again, that's a whole function of is the marketing resource that you have actually being focused on the areas where it can really play a major role, where as the word should comes in. I hate the word should, but I think it's appropriate in this context. And the final question from today, and then we'll be giving Elliot a chance to give his words of wisdom, is what's happening to the headcount? And it's about the same. In other words, it is the blip. In other words, if you compare where it's likely to be in 2021 with how it was before the pandemic, you're going back to where you were. And I suspect because marketing departments have been growing significantly through the years, that's maybe more of a steady state, and that in a way is a change from the historical pattern. But broadly, most people are about the same. So that's the message. So I'll stop sharing the results now, and I will, if I may, welcome Eliot Moss, who, as I said, is the marketing director and Director of Business Development and Partner, let's get it correct, so, of Mishcon de Reya, which is a very well-known and successful law firm, and he's going to give some thoughts as to where marketing fits in and where marketing can really add value to the mix. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. That's a lot of information to take on, isn't it? So I'm going to, obviously 5 minutes is pretty short, so I will not attempt to cover everything. There are 6 words which I think are important in thinking about this and what we've just heard, and 6 words only. The first 2 words are Donald Trump. The second 2 words are Nicola Mendelsohn, and I'll tell you who she is in a moment if you don't know. And the third set of 2 words are Martin Sorrell. And the reason I mention those 3 is because I haven't got very long, and B, because they bring together what for me is a hobby horse around the definition of what all this stuff is about. When we look at these polls, we often disaggregate and silo off the various areas of strategy, of operations, of service, of CRM, and all these other things. And frankly, I don't view the world like that. My approach to helping a professional service firm grow, and indeed any brand grow, is to essentially see everything under the 3 headings of Donald, Nicola, and Martin. And Donald Trump is under the heading of whatever our politics are, and I can imagine of the 59 people here, I could pretty well guess where we all want this to end, but you never know. He's possibly one of the best marketeers in the world. When he said the word socialism, he mobilized the Cuban vote in Florida. When he says the word, and we knew he would say it, cheat or robbing or stealing, we know exactly what he means. He has an incredible ability to crystallize everything down to its simplest form. And that, in essence, is the role of part 1 of the brand differentiation. That is really the value of marketing, brand differentiation. And as the word, and it's the clue is in the word, listening to the market. The marketing, and I'm not going to try and summarize 50 years of theory and all the books that some of you have read, or some of the books that all of you have read. Marketing is about listening to the market. And Richard said in his setup that listening is one of the key words in that particular sentence. You drive awareness by essentially nailing what it is that people need to hear. And you don't just do that gratuitously, which is probably what Donald does a little bit, but you do it based on what you think will work, that will help drive your business. So awareness drivers, whatever they are, and Marcoms, I hate the expression, sorry, Richard, is just one facet of driving awareness, and there are many. And the tap has to be on the whole time. Great brands are 24/7, the way they talk regarding awareness, and Donald Trump epitomizes that. He's never off, and great brands should never be off. So everything that we do as a business is about being on wherever, online, offline, in a magazine, in someone's consciousness, wherever we can, because awareness drives salience, salience drives consideration, consideration drives growth. And it's a very simple formula. So Donald is my my exemplar for the awareness piece around differentiation of brand. The second part of that, Nicola Mendelsohn, she's the VP for Europe for Facebook. Nicola Mendelsohn knows how to monetize connections. She's got a huge black book, but it's not just to Richard's point around the list of people. It's a real live living organism of thousands and thousands and thousands of contacts that help her drive growth. Connections, which is part 2 of brand differentiation, is about doing things that are interesting to your audience, that resonate in the same way that Bucket One and Donald Trump does around awareness. You talk about the things that relate, and you go out and you see people. In the virtual world, you do it like this, or you do it through our Mishcon Academy digital sessions. You curate content and you relentlessly bring people into your group. You bring people in that will be great conveners, that will essentially enable you to position yourself with great credibility as a business. So by association, you ensure that people find you interesting. Events, topics, content. Again, I saw the thought leadership was somewhere as another line item. It's not. Thought leadership is just a subset of awareness driving and connections. So connections and understanding that it's really important not just to know people, but to know why and what you want to do with those people, a critical part of differentiating your brand. And you can do that the way that you create an event, what you talk about, who you bring onto it, and where that event lives now, which is whether it's online, whether it's a 10-minute film of the event, whatever it is, that's around connecting, and that's part 2 of differentiating your brand. And part 3, most critically, and where you don't really need part 1 and part 2, is Martin Sorrell. So Martin is a relentless deliverer of client service, and the service delivery, the brand promise, really ends up, the rubber hits the road with whether your advisors, your partners, your individuals. I've got 550 lawyers at Mishcon. Each one of them is the living embodiment of the brand. And if they don't differentiate, if they don't bring to life its business, but it's personal, if they don't help clients see how we can shape their worlds, the world's possibilities for them, then we're finished. Then forget 1 and 2, forget Donald Trump, forget Nicola Mendelsohn. Martin Sorrell is 24/7. Martin Sorrell listens and innovates, brings in new ideas, develops services, uses data. We haven't heard that today. We have a huge function around data science. Data science helps you both grow clients and keep clients. And that's not CRM, it's something else. That's really having, and we've got fantastic people, and I'm sure many of you are using that. The fusion of data and creativity is an enormous win for any professional service firm right now. And creativity is one of those things that you can't read about necessarily. You really have to live and breathe it and make connections that others don't. So that service point, that fantastic delivery, understanding what great delivery looks like, understanding what clients want, back to marketing, understanding the market, are for me the 3 things that will bring value to the business and are inextricably linked to the strategy of the business, the purpose of the business, the way the operation is. And I look at all these lists, Richard, and I just say, no, look at all of them as once as a management team. And each person around the table should be able to add something. Because if you have an alignment of behaviors, I'm sure William will talk about this, of people understanding strategy, of people understanding purpose, of people understanding what great standards are, you will be able to differentiate your brand. But differentiation is about your delivery of your service. It is about the letter that you get at the beginning. The engagement letter is not just a put money on the account, please. The engagement letter is a manifestation of what you stand for. It's all part of a differentiated brand, understanding your market and delivering value and ongoing business growth. And if you need new clients, it's exactly the same as needing new business from current clients. Do those things, align those things, and you've got a chance to win.
Thanks, Elliot. That was really helpful. I think it's nice to put everything into one mix. I agree with you, but if you don't break it down, sometimes people get a bit lost, I find. Robert, you've been running a very successful West Country law firm for a number of years. You're now moving into a consultancy role. Obviously, we've heard Elliot's thoughts. You've seen all the stuff that we've saw before that. I mean, and I think strategy is probably the area where I'm hopefully you're going to sort of give us some sense. But from a leader's perspective, how do you break things down? How do you see the sort of the need to bring everybody working together as a team in order to achieve your objectives?
Okay, well, thanks, Richard, and good morning, everyone. A lot of what I'm going to say will resonate with what Elliot has already said, actually, because I see marketing and brand as a key part of the strategy anyway. For those firms that are willing to embrace the seismic change that we've had to go through, I see this as an exciting future. And I certainly don't see this as the new norm, because new norm is boring. This is exciting for those who want to really change. And that means you've got to look at your strategy. You've got to completely refocus on your strategy. And I use the word focus. Richard mentioned it earlier in his introduction. For me, leaders of professional service firms have got a lot on their plate at the moment, and so focus is key. Should be focusing on what is working well, what worked well before the pandemic, and what is working well now. Focus on what's good for your clients as well, picking up on some of the things Elliot was saying. And most importantly, focus on what's making a profit. So we've all come across stop, start, continue. I've slightly nuanced that to stop, start, accelerate. So I would recommend that as a leadership team, you look at stopping doing stuff that wasn't working before the pandemic, but you just did it because you'd always done it. We all know where areas in our business which we should have stopped doing years or months ago. Vanity projects, command and controlled style leadership. Those things need to stop if you're wanting to embrace this new world that we're entering, this exciting future. Start really embracing the new ways of working. Listen to the clients. I think this is really interesting, and picking up what Elliot and also Richard has mentioned earlier. What we need to understand as leaders is that our clients have also gone through this seismic change. They've all gone through this emotional roller coaster. I use a slide where I put up the usual change curve, where you have all of the emotions and everybody at different stages of the emotions, and the horizontal axis can be months, if not years. But actually, after the 23rd of March, we all got to the end point within days. But that doesn't mean to say that those emotions aren't still there. They're just hidden. But those are the emotions that your clients are going through. They've gone through the same seismic change that we went through. And just a small example of what I mean by listening to your clients. I know a lot of law firms are going down the Microsoft Teams route, and they're telling their clients, and I say that intentionally, they are telling their clients that the only way they're going to communicate with them is through Microsoft Teams. What about those clients who run their whole business on Google? What message does that give to those clients that they're actually being told they've got to use another system to communicate with their professional advisors? So listen to your clients and understand what they want. Another good example of how you can start doing something differently is extending the working day. I don't mean by making your lawyers and staff work longer hours. But clients now are used to sending Zoom meeting invites at 7 o'clock in the evening. So why not go into that untapped market of people who've perhaps left the profession either permanently or temporarily because they didn't want to work 9 to 5, in particular maternity leavers, and offer them the role of triaging in the evening so that clients who ring up actually speak to a lawyer who knows a bit about the subject. I know one firm who've done that. They picked up 2 matrimonial clients worth over £100,000 in fees by just answering the phones on Sunday afternoon with somebody who knew what they were talking about. Also, start looking at the non-geographical market. It was interesting, the slides on whether remote working is going to impact on getting new business. So often we were restricted by our geographical base, but now the market is everywhere. And then that comes to the third point, accelerate. And actually, I'll pick up on what Elliot said. This is where I think you can tap into that much wider market by really leveraging your brand. And what do I mean by that? What people are looking for at the moment is brand stories. They want to identify with organizations, corporations, global organizations, professional service firms that have truly identified with the pain and suffering that we've all had to go through. We only have to think of the calamities that people like Virgin, Sports Direct, BA have gone through by misjudging the population. So if you've got brand stories about where you have helped in your local community, no matter how small, how you've treated your staff, shout about them on your social media. Get your staff to do it. But this comes back to the point about moving away from command and control. You need to empower your staff. Let them speak in language that they like, that connects with their clients. everything doesn't have to go through the marketing team's sieve anymore. Yes, you want brand guidelines, but empower people to be themselves, especially when it comes to social media. And just finally, a little thing that I think I've been speaking to a couple of firms about. Again, it's touching and empathizing with your clients. Everybody is struggling at the moment. So what about when you get a new instruction, or you're a partner leading a team and you get repeat business, or one of your team members gets a new instruction? Just send a WhatsApp message to that client saying, thanks for the instructions, really appreciate it. And then when they pay the bill, again, another simple message, thank you for paying the bill. I really appreciate this at this time. So it's not big picture redefining your strategy. It's looking at those things that are really working, that you can embrace. Most of strategy actually is small things, and they make a big difference. So I just finished by saying, stop doing the stuff that you shouldn't be doing, those vanity projects. Start embracing the new ways of working. And where you see them working, accelerate them. And that's where you should be putting your resources. Accelerate the things that are really working to tap into that client market that has grown exponentially by the fact that everybody is now working from home.
Thanks, Robert. That was really great. William, again, I think your role is possibly a little bit different in the sense that I think your focus is much more around the leader helping people who perhaps aren't feeling as positive about the new world as Robert clearly is. Do you want to come and give us a little insight as to some of the areas which leaders might be thinking about, where for those who perhaps are struggling with, if not mental health, at least stress as resulting from being in a space that they feel a bit uncomfortable or worse?
Sure. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. To paraphrase Keith Richards, it's nice to be anywhere. We visit, believe it or not, Richard, the North is not a different country, and stress is not regional. Stress at the moment is global. As you know, our client base is almost exclusively professional services firms worldwide. And during the last lockdown, I had a really interesting interview with an HR director, a global HR director for a global strategy firm. And at the end of the conversation, he just downloaded with all of the sort of stressful things that were impacting him. And I wrote them up on an article, which is on our website, called Blocked in Lockdown. And I think it's worth revisiting those or a few of them, because they're even more critical at the moment. And a number of things that Elliot brought up and that Robert brought up link into essentially something we've been talking about a lot recently on keynote speeches and with development programs, which is about the role of the partner. And we've often said that there are three roles of a partner, which is to exemplify the brand, to embody the culture, and to ensure the legacy. And exemplifying the brand comes into the marketing piece, which I'll maybe pick up later on. But embodying the culture has a lot to do with role modeling and with and has an impact on the stress. So some of the key things that we've seen the impact of lockdown and remote working, firstly, is this culture of permanently available. Everybody thinks that everybody else, particularly senior people, is permanently available. And the more the senior people demonstrate that they are permanently available, the more everyone else expects that they're supposed to be permanently available, and the more stressful that can become. Those who are familiar with Victorian history will be aware of panopticism, the Benton's Panoptic Tower, where basically people under observation went crazy because they thought they were being observed all the time. A similar thing there. The other thing we've noticed, and this is more recently I've noticed, is that there is initially people were very tolerant from remote working and Zoom calls. And I've noticed that level of tolerance has decreased. So people are becoming actually less tolerant of the cat sitting on the desk, or people bursting into the room, or people being half dressed. And also I've noticed, and I've tested this with a number of our clients worldwide in accounting, law, and consulting, people are becoming, there seems to be a decline in sort of common courtesies and manners and professionalism. And I'm wondering if it's because people are working remotely, there's less likelihood of getting punched on the nose if you're rude. There's a really interesting New York Times article called "We're All Socially Awkward Now," which talks about how difficult people are going to find it when they actually go back to face-to-face. There are going to be some very uncomfortable meetings because social skills in lockdown have declined. People are losing their social skills, and the re-entry is going to be difficult. It's going to be a bit like people being released from being a hostage. The other sort of things we've noticed are the "can you hear me" syndrome, meaning that everybody on a Zoom has to be here and has to make a contribution. So the conversations are often overloaded. We've noticed the Machiavellian politics, informal networks are having much more influence. The sort of standard decision-making processes are being shortcut. Thinking's often being outsourced to Google, often during the call where people will look up an answer on Google. Fractured governance, regular processes are disrupted. The sort of "sorry to ring again" syndrome, but I know you're there. So we've got now WhatsApp, we've got Slack, various instant messaging. And so the number of interruptions each day are enormous, and people are feeling constantly under pressure. So stress is global, not regional. How do you reduce it? Well, the partners have it, and I'm going to just finish on the role of the partner in a moment. Firstly, the partners have to exemplify, embody the culture. So they've got to set an example. They've got to take a break. They've got to set clear boundaries and be aware of the pressure that's exerted by their behavior on the people who report to them. Equally, I did a keynote for a global network of accounting and law firms earlier this week, and I talked about the role of emotional intelligence. Elliot mentioned empathy earlier on, and Robert mentioned the word as well. Empathy, people developing empathy, generally empathetic reactions come from picking up non-verbal signals, which are much easier when you're face-to-face. When you're on Zoom or on a video call, you're relying on picking up micro-expressions, and the pixelated nature of the screen and the nature of broadband makes those much harder to identify. So I ran a set of 20 slides and I ran a poll asking the participants, there were about 300, to identify the emotion expressed by the micro-expression. And we only got about 50% success rate at best, because it's just so hard to do. So be tolerant, be empathetic, and think about common courtesies. One final comment then to finish is the poll result. And I'm going to be provocative here. I wonder if the poll results on the role of the importance of marketing are a function of the partners being a little nervous about having the intimate client conversations themselves and outsourcing that to marketing.
Well, I'm sure Elliot will pick that one up shortly. But first, Francesca, let's have your thoughts. I mean, I love the idea we were all hostages somehow, and now we're all going to be going back into the real world and having to re-engage with people with awkward conversations. That's not one I've heard before. I think it's a really great insight. But I'd love to hear your thoughts today.
Sure. No, thank you, Richard. As always, lots of food for thought there. Let me just pick up on a couple of things. Well, let me start with your hostage point. I'd slightly challenge that, because I think people have had to be much more agile, connecting with someone in this strange, weird laptop world. I think you have to work harder, be more thoughtful, and it really makes you think harder. If you want to win work in this environment, oh my Lord, do you have to work at it? What happens if you've never met that person? You're trying to create a connection and get them to give you a job. You know, the amount of effort and time involved in making that really work, I think is a skill that we've had to develop pretty fast. And it's been intriguing to see the great work wins that have been going on during this time, despite not having that ability to connect in the way that we'd really like to. A couple of other things that really stood out for me today. Elliot, gosh, you've got some interesting role models there. Donald, Nicola, and Martin. Oh gosh, I've met Martin a few times. Not renowned for their lovability, those three, are they? So intriguing intriguing about just viewing them through another lens, that they're highly effective, despite using a bit of a perhaps an unfair analogy, not always being highly likable, but that output and what they're doing is really intriguing. So I thought that was quite a good challenge to us. We do tend to pocket those sorts of individuals into a different category. Stop, start, accelerate. For Robert, love all of that, of course. But I picked it up when we were chatting before we started today. Your gratitude wall, those postcards you had sitting behind you, the simplicity of it is why it's so good, because it's thoughtful, it's timely, it's in the moment. And a thank you goes, my old granny used to say, nothing is more time sensitive or as rewarding as a simple thank you, and how right she was. And then I think what I also take away from that sort of the holistic piece today, I always love the fact that marketing is ending up at the top of our polling. Go back a few months and marketing people were being laid off and put on furlough and stuck in a cupboard, and then people have realised you actually need to win work. But there's a fascinating piece there around, we sometimes put marketing in this separate box as though it's something different from the whole. And I think several speakers today made the very valid point that if you're going to be successful at marketing, it's wholly integrated into your business. It's not something that you come to and go from. It is part of what you do. And if it isn't interlinked in a professional service way with service lines and go-to-market ideas, it's not effective. And equally, if that go-to-market issue doesn't use its marketing skills, it's being less effective. So there's a really strong holistic message there, Richard.
Thanks very much. Elliot, there's a couple of points there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this issue around likability we maybe can park, but this issue of our partners looking to outsource the business development to marketing people, which was raised by William at the end. Your thoughts on that would be interesting.
I'm sure some of them do. I think that so just for our business, 550 lawyers and 38 people in the business development and marketing team, excluding strategy people and data science people, and then all the external agency people that I use. So let's even say it's a group of 60 people that are dependent. There is no way that I would want those 60 people to be anything other than stimulants and helpful. And if I was one of the lawyers, one of the partners, I wouldn't want anyone to have to do my bidding. The responsibility, at least in our business, is with our partners to drive business and to be good leaders and to touch on things that Francesca and Robert and William all said in slightly in complementary ways. It's their job. The job of people, of a fee earner in a law firm, in our law firm, is to both grow their business and to service their clients properly, and that's how we remunerate them. So all that a good, helpful business development person can do is, to use your phrases, is advise frontline people, is to prepare pitches with them. But it's no more than that. It's got to be, the responsibility is there. We started something when I joined the firm, actually 11 years ago. It occurred to me that the simple things, to Francesca's pick up on Robert's very pretty wall, and I like the cut. You're obviously a colour nut as well, because you've sort of blended the oranges, the blues and the pinks. That's not by accident, ladies and gentlemen. That's not by accident. Robert likes his colours. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. The point about the thing I did right at the beginning was the simple thing, which was to say to partners and lawyers, make one call a day. Make one call a day to a client or a contact, ideally not on the matter, but between a matter, and ideally someone you haven't done it, but that you know is potentially a source of business, but more than that, because you want to. And the one call a day mantra has turned into, under lockdown 9 years later, 3 calls a day. And the 3 calls a day is for those individuals to take responsibility. You talked, Richard, you said hopefully you'll come up with it, you'll share a small thing. That's a small, huge thing, because if you think about 500 lawyers making 3 calls a day over the period of lockdown, it's millions of pounds that we know we can directly attribute to that. But more than that, to Francesca's point and to William's about empathy, it's about connection. And when we don't have this, when we don't have face-to-face, you absolutely need to connect. So those calls have facilitated a whole slew of conversations, a whole slew of what's going on, what's happening, because as we've all said, we're all in this together. It's much better watching the movie in a theatre than it is at home. Well, it's much worse experiencing something globally, but it's pretty collective. And so that reaching out, both financially and emotionally, has been super powerful. But to answer your question, it's absolutely squarely at the responsibility of the individuals, because that is where, as I said, that's where the service starts and ends. All that my team do is facilitate, and of course they'll have relationships as well. But it's not. They're the people that are delivering the work, and it should be that way.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Elliot. Great clarity around the role of marketing and BD. Robert, apart from everybody now wanting to see your wall desperately, so you can tell us all about it, what's your thoughts on the role of marketing, and how has that helped your firm grow through the years?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar to what Elliot is saying. I think marketing are the ones who should come up with the ideas and then help and support. But at the end of the day, the brand is the partners and the legal advisors, as well as all the other people interacting with the clients. But it's the partners and the legal advisors who are actually going to be bringing in the new work, or the majority of the new work. Yes, marketing could do a pitch and you might win that, but you've got to have that relationship. And I love your point, Elliot, about 3 calls a day, because yes, we all try and get our partners to do 1 call a week, but 3 calls a day is fantastic. But then picking up on William's point, I do think there are a lot of law partners who are scared about ringing clients on a non-transactional basis. They are scared about showing human emotions because they feel that that's not their role. Their role is to be very analytical and make sure the transaction goes through in the best way for the client. So I think one of the things coming out of the pandemic is there's going to have to be a lot more learning and development on those empathy skills and listening skills. Lawyers are not good at listening. We're very transactional focused. William's grinning, so William, you may want to comment on that.
On the keynote that I gave earlier this week, one of the questions that came in right at the end was, can you teach emotional intelligence to lawyers? And my answer was, they must have started as humans at one point. But it is difficult, because if you think about the progress, most lawyers make their careers around technical expertise. And technical expertise is necessary, but it's no longer sufficient. What differentiates, I mean, I loved Elliot's stuff. We could talk for hours about marketing, and equally the role of the partner in exemplifying the brand and the stories. Everything the partner does has to exemplify and exemplify the brand and embody the culture. So to assert it is not enough. You have to be able to illustrate and demonstrate the brand values of the firm in every conversation. And that's sometimes a challenge, because the default position often for a highly technical lawyer or accountant or consultant is to default to the technical conversation. And as Francesca said, and she's quite right, some people do this intuitively and have made great progress in this, but others have found it incredibly difficult to move from the technical conversation. I love the phrase, not on the matter, but between the matter. So on the matter, the technical conversation; between the matter, meaning the non-technical conversation. And one German partner in an accounting firm actually called me and said, I'm not sure how I have a conversation with a client. And it was, but that's because their whole career has been built around technical expertise. So I think, yes, you can teach emotional intelligence. Well, actually, let's say it can be learned, but it's, we have a joke in our firm. For 30 years, we've had this joke that the definition of partner means no further development required. And that's where it's difficult, because if you've been a successful partner in a global firm, to suddenly have your emotional intelligence challenged by a virtual world and an ability and a necessity to develop relationships is a massive challenge, and something that they haven't faced before.
Bring Francesca into that one. In a way, it also goes back, I think, to the basis on which partners are selected. In other words, the traditional criteria were all about technical expertise, but actually, increasingly these days, people recognise, as William said, it's necessary but not sufficient, and the client skills. So we're again coming up to the end, but I mean, your thoughts. And one thing I just pick up quickly is I have seen a number of accountancy firms that have hired people, I'll almost say put them on the car on the road. It's not quite that easy, but they bring a sector specialist in from somewhere else who then drives and works with the partners very actively into specific sectors as an approach, and the extent to which that possibly works differently in law from accountancy would be interesting.
Yeah, and I'm picking up on that last piece, Richard. I think there has been a big expansion into getting in different kinds of individuals to bring a different subset of thinking, particularly around industries. Far more compelling if you're trying to build credentials in an area to bring in an expert in that area. But to that general point around, is it good enough just to be a technical expert? I think you do have some people that you put in a darkened room and you bring them out just to be the technical expert. We all know who they are. We all have them in our firm. But if you're going to really succeed in the classic mid-market area, you just can't be that alone. You've got to have relationship skills, and the really successful work-winning partners tend to have that lovely combination of technical know-how. Those are table stakes, but an ability to build a relationship, listen attentively. And I think that's where skills like coaching, mentoring, which many firms now do. We're partnered with EMCC. We do a lot of stuff around coaching. We've put 400 people through a coaching program this year, and we will continue to do that. I mean, those kinds of things enable people to build their emotional intelligence, because I think you're right. Some people have it, some people can build on it, but everyone can get better at it.
William, perhaps a final thought from you. Do you think this is, you said it can be trained, but is it actually better to focus on the selection and bringing people into the profession?
You know, it's the oldest adage in HR is people get hired for skills and fired for attitude. Actually, I'm a great believer that you can pretty much train people in pretty much anything, but training behavior is really hard, much harder than training skills. So I think there is a move towards hiring for attitude. We're seeing the apprentice scheme, we're seeing blind interviewing, we're seeing much more of the bias being taken out. And I think that, you know, I often say that a culture is defined by the behaviors you tolerate. And where you see really strong cultures, particularly in professional services, is they're almost holographic. And in the nature of a hologram, the property of a hologram is that no matter how many pieces you break it up into, you shine a laser through it and you still get the whole image. And this is true of very strong professional services cultures. Everybody is aligned, everybody exemplifies the brand, everybody embodies the culture. And what the other thing that defines them is that non-compliant behavior in a strong culture is dealt with immediately and transparently. And because of that, you don't get so much of it. But once you start to tolerate non-compliant behavior or off-brand or off-message, the culture disintegrates. So I do think there is a change in the hiring process. And I do think it's much more about attitudes and behaviors now than it is about, but there will clearly be a sort of entry point of base level qualifications, but the behaviors are going to be the differentiator.
Thanks very much. And of course, the other point has often been pointed out by various people is that if you have a tolerant culture, then the only way to keep your high flyers is to pay them a lot more money, because otherwise they won't want to stick around. So it actually is quite an expensive way of approaching it. And certainly you can see that in a number of the major consultants. I won't name names. So anyway, I'm afraid it has now come to that time when I'm going to have to bid adieu to today's panel. And I would like to thank Elliot, I would like to thank William, and I'd like to thank Robert for their really inspiring contribution. We've covered a huge amount of territory today. It just seems like 1 hour has gone by in a flash, which is always fantastic with the show. So thank you. Coming soon, as you'll see from the slide, you're going to be able to see all the contributions, 3 from today. So you'll see Elliot's, you'll see Robert's, and you'll see William's. I haven't quite worked out how to deal with Francesca, because she's on every time. And I think if I put 31 episodes of Francesca, even Francesca's husband might think that was a bit extreme. But what we are allowing you to do, and you'll see here, is actually select by a keyword and by a presenter. This is it's not live, this is just a snapshot, but it is working. So hopefully next week we'll have that up. And then all the 60 to 70 videos of all the fantastic experts that you've seen through the months will now be available for you to go and look at. And they're typically a 5-minute, which is a really nice time. So something to look forward to. If you also want to watch the whole of the show, because often the discussions are really interesting, again, that will be available in the management library early next week. And I think it only then remains for me to say, I hope you found today valuable. I certainly did. Thought it was really interesting. Thank you again to the panel. And please encourage your peers to book for future episodes, because at the end of the day, we're a public good. And what we want to try and do is help people deal with what for many people is a very scary space. So thank you again, and have a great day. Bye for now.